Okay, so for today's lesson, we're going to be doing Chapter 3, and the title is Slavery and Annexation. And this is because at the time, the United States had an even number of slave states versus free states. And so if they added Texas, it would throw off their equality of, having the same number of slave states and free states. And Texas definitely wanted to keep slavery because cotton was their number one cash crop. So from 1836 to 1840, there was an equal number of slave states versus free states in the USA. Texas, again, definitely wanted to remain a slave state if they were admitted into the United States. So I'm going to say if they were annexed, because annexed means to be added to a country. So they wanted to remain a slave state if they were annexed. And the reason why? Cotton made Texans rich. Lots of money. Now, Texas is not annexed until 1845. So there's about 5 years there between the time that the United States was saying, hey, we have, equal slave and free states, and the time that that Texas actually gets annexed. So what was going on is westward expansion. And as the United States grew, they had a set way of creating new states. And what would happen is when enough people moved into a territory, they could apply for statehood. And they could write a constitution and all these things and be admitted. And so the United States was really struggling with how to keep that equality in Congress, because the question of whether or not to allow slavery in the United States was happening at the time. And so we had northern states that did not agree with slavery, and southern states who depended on it for their livelihood. So if we look at, going back over here, Texas definitely wanted to be admitted, and they had been paying off their debts. They proved that they did make quite a bit of money off of the cotton that was grown in Texas. And so when Houston was reelected for his second term, he worked really hard to try to assure that Texas would be annexed. And it wasn't happening, basically because the United States had a lot going on. And so Texas came up with a plan. And this is the plan. It's kind of, they kind of used some trickery here. Texas had a plan for annexation. Okay. And the way the plan is Texas said, well, okay, if y'all want to annex us, then we're going to have to make some closer connections to some of the foreign countries around, because Mexico is still attacking, and we need allies. And knowing how Great Britain felt towards the United States and how the United States felt towards Great Britain, that is the foreign country that they chose. So Texans went to Great Britain and they said, hey, Great Britain, if you will work with Mexico, make them recognize us as an independent nation, then we'll trade with y'all a whole lot more and be allies with you instead of the United States. So they're basically playing the United States and Great Britain against each other. So the plan for annexation was to get Great Britain to convince Mexico to recognize Texas independence. Great Britain had some really good ties with Mexico at the time, and they thought they could definitely get that done. And then meanwhile, Texas goes to the United States and says, hey, we're going to be working with Great Britain a lot more, so we're going to have to charge y'all more for our cotton, and, Great Britain will get first pick. And yeah, if Great Britain feels like attacking y'all again and taking over again, even though y'all won your independence in 1776, we might help them do that. So then you have the United States like, oh, crap. We need to, we do want you. We want that manifest destiny, but we just can't do it right now. So they're playing each other against them because the United States never, ever really wanted to not be annexed. They were just pretending like it. So the reason Great Britain agreed to do this is because they believed it would make the U.S. too powerful if they were to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Great Britain got the U.S. No, there's not two E's. There's two O's. So again, this is Great Britain still being upset about 1776. I mean, it's 1840. It's like, give it up already. But Great Britain truly was afraid that, what if the United States became too powerful and then came and attacked them all, across the Atlantic Ocean? It was something that they had to think about. So they didn't want the U.S. to be too terribly powerful. So meanwhile, the years are going by, and the U.S. president does want annexation to happen. And they're trying to work out a deal because he takes the treaty of annexation to Congress, and Congress votes no. He's like, geez, how can we do this? How can we do this? And they're still dangling this whole thing about Great Britain and, being allies with them and so on in front of Congress. And then James K. Polk is elected. But he's not president yet. But one of the main reasons why people elected Polk is because the way he felt about annexation. And the U.S. people, well, a majority of them, believed in manifest destiny just like James Polk did. And so, since he was going to be the new president coming in, and since Congress was also going to change when he came in, like right before James K. Polk was sworn in, they were able to come up with a treaty of annexation that Congress actually agreed to. So, after James K. Polk is sworn in as president, because, treaties take time, and, they had to get Congress to agree to it, and then they had to amend some things, and then the Texans had to go back to Texas, because again, still no phones. They had to go back to Texas and ask the Texas government, hey, is this okay? Do all the people agree to this? And it was back and forth. But finally, on July 4th, the same day as American independence, only several, years later, 1845, the Treaty for Annexation was signed. So Texas was admitted into the United States as a territory, not as a full state, as a territory. And that's because they now had to come up with a state constitution that agreed with the U.S. Constitution. And once they came up with a state constitution and the U.S. legislature said, okay, yes, this looks good, then they got their statehood. Excuse me. So now let's talk about the war that is definitely going to happen because Mexico is not happy that Texas was annexed. This picture, I can kind of give you an idea of what was going on. Let's see, I'm going to shade. So all of these states down here, you can't see every single one of them, but for the most part, they all depended on slaves for their economy. And then all of the states north up in here did not depend. They did have slaves, so they didn't depend on it quite as much. So when it came to questioning whether or not to keep slaves, they were more likely to vote against having slavery. And this line right here, you see, is very much pretty straight. And that is a certain line of latitude. I believe it is, honestly, I can't remember what number it's at. But that is because there was something, which I also cannot remember, in the, it was called the Missouri Compromise. Sorry. And in the United States Constitution, they said any territory that is added to the United States that is south of this kind of imaginary line of latitude has the right to be a slave state. And then any territory that is north of that line right here, so all of this, would be admitted as a free state. And it basically, so however many people moved into an area, they could apply for statehood and be admitted. And they weren't going to fight anymore about trying to keep equal representation and have an equal number of slave states versus free states. So this is what the U.S. map looked like when Texas was first annexed. And this line right here is the Nueces River. This is what Mexico said was the southern border of Texas. Texas said, it's the Rio Grande River, all the way up to Colorado. So this area right in here is a disputed area. Now, the United States agreed, of course, with Texas and said, yeah, it's the Rio Grande. Why not? And Mexico said, no, it's not. It's the Nueces River. And so, of course, an impending war, war was going to happen because they had to determine, is it this Rio Grande River or not? And then also, of course, the U.S. also wanted all of this. Well, here I'll draw a line. The United States, and I can't tell you why, but they agreed that that's not it. That line is way off. They agreed that they would just take this right here. This would be Mexico, and this would be part of the United States. They were willing to buy it from Mexico. And they were so willing to buy it from Mexico that even though they're still arguing about this orange area, they send a guy to Mexico City to offer to pay, I think, $11 million to purchase the disputed area and this area that was called California at the time. Mexico named that area California. And that didn't go over too well. So, all right. My lines might be kind of funky here, y'all. So, not Texas. Oh my gosh, they're part of the United States now. Even I have to get that in my head. Okay. The United States offered to buy the area of Mexico known as California. And again, all of this area is known as California to Mexico. They didn't have Arizona, they didn't have New Mexico, they didn't have Nevada. Didn't have Colorado, like, it was just California. And Mexico said, absolutely not. Now this led to, of course, a war, a battle. And the Texans took immediate, like, action, because they're right, where's my thing? Oh, okay, great. The Texans are right here. And so when Mexico takes offense to the United States offering to buy California, the Mexican army, or some troops, not the whole army, they come across and they start attacking Texas. Well, the Texans are ready for that, along with some U.S. troops, but the United States hadn't had time to completely get their full army into Texas. So the Texas army immediately jumps into action and they start fighting all in this area. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army is like, you know what? Maybe the Texans have it here, and maybe we should go attack from the sea. It's back here. All of this, if you give us back our capital. And in doing so, they signed peace treaties, and part of the peace treaty said, hey, don't ever attack Texas again. And you have to recognize the Rio Grande River as the southern border to Texas. And Mexico said, yes, 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 yes. And then in return, the U.S. said, we're so happy and we don't want to be enemies. We want to be more like frenemies, so we're going to give you money for the land that you ceded us. So that's kind of how all that went down. Although, let's see. Mexico says no. The Mexican-American war breaks out. The U.S. captures Mexico City. Mexico gives up. So that's how the United States made Manifest Destiny, like, actually happen. Kind of amazing, kind of just lucky, but it worked out. So I'm just going to show you kind of how all that went down. So you've got Texas troops battling all along the Rio Grande River here and inland. Over here, right here, Washington, D.C. is like, oh, crap, we need to hurry up and go help the Texans. And instead of going across land, the quickest way to get there would be to take ships and pull into Galveston Harbor anyway. But a naval commander sees an opening and decides to take it. So there were many, many ships that landed here. And not all of them came from Washington. A lot of them came from Louisiana and Alabama. So these are boats. And they're carrying soldiers. And they land in Texas. But one commander said, hey, why not? Let's just go try to take Mexico City, take their capital, and be done with this. Knowing that Mexico's government was still very unstable. And it worked. So we've got U.S. and American troops fighting along here. We'll make the Mexicans red. Mexican troops fighting here. And now U.S. troops traveling towards Mexico City. And Mexico City is not prepared for that because they've sent their army up here. So this naval commander easily takes Mexico City and basically holds it for ransom until Mexico quits fighting and also agrees to sell the United States the land that they want. So Mexico does what they call cede. They ceded land to the United States. It was land that the United States wanted, and they're like, haha, we have you beat. Right here, we have your capital. And the United States could have claimed all of Central America. But they didn't. They said, we just want this area right here. Give it to us. And so Mexico, in order to keep all of this, they said, okay, fine. We'll give you the area that we call California. So to end the Mexican-American War, they had Mexico sign what was called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. And again, you see here, this is the territory that Mexico had, that the United States wanted, and Mexico lost so that they would get to keep this area down here. Texas is fully annexed and admitted as a state, and the shape of Texas is this funky looking shape right here. And that is because of the northern border being considered the Red River, the Sabine River right here, which had already been established as their eastern boundary, and the Rio Grande River being Texas's western boundary. The United States gave Mexico more than they were going to pay originally. They gave them $15 million. They guaranteed that any Mexican citizens living in this area would be protected. They would get to keep their property and everything else. And yes, this was another lie, because they were discriminated against, and it's what the Anglo-Americans did. They promised to police the boundaries to keep any, I guess you would call them filibusters, from going into Mexico and trying to take more land. And they agreed to take over all the debts that the Mexican government owed to the U.S. citizens. So you definitely need to know what the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was and what you exactly need to know for you right down here. Okay, so the outcome of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was that the United States and Mexico weren't fighting anymore. The USA and Mexico ended their conflict. Conflict means disagreement. It means fight. And then, as a result of the U.S.-Mexican War, The southern boundary of Texas was designated as the Rio Grande River. And that, you guys, is the end.